I refuse to lose. Not the savings, not the reputation, the house at the end of Maple Ridge, with the iron gate my wife insisted on, and the wooden steps I sanded down myself one quiet Sunday afternoon. And I came home one cold evening to find the front door open and someone inside, acting like it already belonged to them. Welcome back to my story. Take a moment, settle in, and remember this. People are always given a choice to do the right thing. Some just decide not to. Leave a comment and make sure you are subscribed. You are going to want to hear how this ends. My name is Daniel Hart. I am 61 years old. I spent 3 decades running a small construction business, building things that were meant to last longer than the people who doubted me. And if you want to understand who I am, I will tell you this. On the day I retired, everyone celebrated, and I spent that entire evening making sure everyone else had enough before I did. I arrive early, I leave late, and I never walk away from something that carries my name. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from right now, wherever you are.
I said, "It is." She looked at me for a moment longer and said, "He stood in this kitchen and spoke to me like I did not belong here." I nodded. "I know." She said, "I kept thinking you would walk through that door before he finished." I told her I should have been there sooner. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine, and said, "You came back. That is what matters. You always come back." A friend of mine, Victor, stopped by that Saturday afternoon. We have known each other long enough that conversation does not require effort. The 3 of us sat outside until the air cooled, then moved into the living room without saying much about it. He brought a cake in a box he insisted came from a bakery across town. It did not. Elena tasted it, smiled slightly, and said it was very good. Victor sat a little straighter when she said that, like he had earned something. At one point, Elena stepped into the kitchen to refill the kettle. Victor leaned toward me slightly and lowered his voice. "How are you actually holding up?" I looked past him, out through the window into the yard. The leaves had started to gather near the fence line, pushed there by the same wind that comes every year around this time. Elena had mentioned them more than once over the past few days.
I would genuinely like to know. Life on Maple Ridge was not something that appeared overnight. It was the result of years that looked ordinary from the outside, but carried weight in ways only the people living them could understand. My wife Elena and I had been married for 34 years, long enough to stop counting milestones and start recognizing patterns. She spent most of her career working as a nurse, the kind of work that teaches you patience whether you want to learn it or not. She retired a year before I did, which meant she had already adjusted to a quieter life by the time I joined her in it. For the first time in decades, we were both home at the same time, with no urgency pulling us in different directions. No alarms, no deadlines, just mornings that started slowly and evenings that ended without pressure. Some people find that kind of stillness uncomfortable. We did not. We had earned it. Elena is not loud. She does not need to be. She has a way of looking at a person that makes them reconsider what they were about to say. And then, just as easily, she can soften a room with a single comment that lands exactly where it should. She notices details most people overlook, a shift in tone, a hesitation in speech, the kind of small inconsistencies that reveals something larger if you give them enough time. We have one son. His name is Adrian. He is 36 years old and works in property consulting. He understands contracts, valuations, projections. More importantly, he understands presentation. He knows how to take something complicated and make it sound simple. He knows how to take something uncertain and make it sound inevitable. That ability built his career. It also created the distance between us. The questions began gradually, the way these things often do. Early in the summer, Adrian asked what houses in our area were selling for. It was a casual question, framed as conversation. I told him I did not know because I had never looked into it.
He nodded, but there was something in that nod that suggested he had already done the research himself. A few weeks later, he came by for dinner. Halfway through the meal, he mentioned that the house felt large for 2 people. Alina responded without hesitation. She said the house felt exactly right. He smiled politely, but I could see the calculation behind it. He was not asking for an opinion, he was testing a position. By August, the subject came up more often. Not directly, never directly, always wrapped in concern, in practicality, in long-term thinking. "What's the plan for the future?" he asked one evening. "The plan," I said, "is to stay where we are." He laughed lightly, as if I had given him a temporary answer to a permanent question. In September, the calls increased, 3 times in a week, each time circling the same idea from a different angle: asset management, efficiency, planning ahead. I told him the future did not require managing, it required understanding what already mattered. He said he understood. He did not. One afternoon, while I was out running errands, Adrian stopped by the house. Elena told me about it later that evening. She mentioned it casually, but I know her well enough to recognize when something stays with her longer than it should. She said he asked whether her name was formally secured in the ownership of the house, whether everything had been properly arranged, whether there were documents that needed updating. Elena told him that whatever needed to be handled would be handled between her and me. Then she offered him coffee. That is who she is. When she told me, I explained that the house had always been in my name and that nothing about that had changed. She nodded, not because she was reassured, but because she had already noticed something that I was now confirming. And when Elena notices something, I do not ignore it. The day everything shifted, I had spent the afternoon helping an old colleague repair a section of fencing on his property. It was simple work, measured, physical, the kind of work that clears your head because it leaves no room for anything else. I drove home just before evening settled in, carrying that quiet sense of completion that comes from finishing something with your own hands. Then, I turned onto Maple Ridge, and I saw Elena standing at the gate. Not in the garden, not on the porch, at the gate. She had a small bag beside her. In that moment, everything unnecessary fell away. There are situations that do not need explanation. You recognize them immediately. I stepped out of the car and walked toward her. She did not move. She simply looked at me. "Daniel," she said. That was all she needed to say. I picked up the bag without asking and took her hand. It was colder than it should have been, not from the weather, but from what had already happened. We walked inside together. The house felt different. Not changed, not damaged, just disturbed in a way that doesn't leave visible marks but is impossible to ignore. Elena sat down at the kitchen table. I poured her a glass of water and waited. She does not rush her words, and I have never rushed her for them. She told me Adrian had come earlier that afternoon. He had brought papers with him, structured documents, printed cleanly, arranged in a way that suggested authority. He told her the house had already been transferred, that everything had been arranged as part of a long-term decision. He said it had been reviewed, confirmed, finalized. He spoke calmly, carefully, like someone explaining something that was no longer open for discussion. He told her it would be easier if she packed what she needed and stayed somewhere else temporarily, just until everything settled. He said he did not want to make things difficult. Elena stood in her own kitchen and listened to her son explain why she should leave her home. When she finished, the silence in the room was complete, not empty, just settled into place. I went to the study and made a single phone call. Rebecca Hale has been my lawyer for over 10 years. She is precise in a way that leaves no room for interpretation. She answered immediately. I explained the situation without adding anything unnecessary. There was a pause. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Leave this with me," she said. "By morning, it will be handled." That was enough. The night passed quietly, but not lightly. Some things settle into your mind whether you allow them to or not. By early morning, the documents were ready. By mid-morning, they had been delivered. I was sitting in the kitchen when my phone rang. Adrian. I let it ring once before answering. He sounded unsettled, not panicked, but no longer certain. "Dad, I received something this morning, a notice. What is this about?" I leaned back slightly and spoke without raising my voice. "Your mother stood outside her own home with a bag because you told her to leave. Take a moment and understand that before you ask anything else." There was a pause. He began to explain, words like planning, opportunity, timing. I let him speak. Then I answered. "The house is mine. It has always been mine. There is no agreement, no transfer, no document that gives you authority over it." Silence. I continued. "You walked into my home and tried to take control of something that was never yours to control. That decision carries consequences." I told him he was no longer welcome at the property. Not for now, not later. That decision was final. He did not argue after that. The call ended shortly after. Some conversations do not need to be extended once they have reached their conclusion. The following week, I met with Rebecca again. We reviewed my estate documents. Adjustments were made where necessary. Certain names were no longer included. That process did not take long. That evening, Elena and I sat at the table again. The same place, the same routine, the same quiet we had built over decades. Nothing needed to be said for things to be understood. The house felt settled again. And this time, it felt certain.